Welcome to the first winter town hall meeting that's completely online. We thought that it would make sense for us to practice a little social distancing and not bring everybody together. I see that we have about 170 people online, so we're also testing our ability to put 170 people on Zoom and not crash the system. So looking forward to trying to make that work. Okay. If you want to send me questions to answer, you can go into the chat room and type them out. And I'll try to answer as many of them as possible after I get through the presentation. And just so you know, this presentation will be recorded and posted on our website. There is something funny. Okay. So just like if we were live, I would start with the land acknowledgement. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibilities to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseno, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to live and work in these homelands. Okay, so about 6 things I'm going to try to cover today. We're going to start with the elephant in the room, or the elephant online, and give an update on COVID ID. Then I'm going to get into what everybody on campus should be proud about, if you don't already know. But I also want to reflect on our challenges, because I know it feels tight out there, probably wherever you are. We're going to highlight how we're going to have more seats in classrooms next year, more housing coming online, and a couple of other additional labs related to greenhouses. Then I'm going to talk briefly about our strategic planning process and the next steps. And then we'll have a Q&A, and I will ask questions and answer questions that are coming in through the chat. So let's jump right in. Notification went out on campus that for winter quarter, final exams will not be held in person. The Executive Council and I met on Monday, and we agreed, because of the current health risk on campus, we are going to try to minimize the amount of in-person contact. Probably the most contact that you can imagine is final exams, where students sit in a room for a 3-hour period, and then at the end they leave and more students come into the same room, and then this is repeated all day. So faculty are doing whatever they can this week to put together online or take home or alternative versions of examinations. But the key piece is that they will not be in person on campus. Our faculty and instructors are also planning to teach spring quarter classes fully online through at least the end of week 1, which will be on April 30th. And they're going to be prepared to continue teaching online unless we've reached a point where we're confident that it's safe to resume courses on campus. So we'll be sending out reminders frequently to keep everybody aware of exactly what's happening regarding teaching, but that is the current plan. Students living on campus may elect to return home at any time through April 3rd, and they'll also receive updates about when they would need to return if we reopened in-class instruction. These measures are only meant to be temporary because we believe that this is an emergency situation, and they will be reviewed and updated regularly. Okay. Contrary to some messaging that has been going around, the campus will not be closed. Campus buildings will remain open, and most campus operations will continue during the time when instruction is online. Some employees may be allowed to work remotely. These decisions will be made at the unit level in collaboration with the appropriate dean or vice chancellor that's over that unit that'll be setting the different criteria for whether or not staff can work from home. Human Resources will be soon providing additional information to managers, supervisors, and employees this afternoon about working remotely, as well as leave options. These options include people who become sick, because we don't want sick people on campus. If you need to take care of a sick family member, or if for some reason, school's closed and you need to stay home to take care of children. Details about how that leave will work should be coming out later today. All right. We are also encouraging no large gatherings, which is one of the reasons why we're online. Sorry that there's no lunch online. So for large gatherings, we're taking action to cancel, postpone, or move all of them to an online platform. For ones that are under 150, we really want to do exactly the same thing. But for things that really have high priority and cannot be stopped, I'm willing to make some exceptions if we can really plan social distancing. We're thinking about at least 6 feet between people and a way to practice good hygiene in those areas. We're trying to make these as few events as possible because this is exactly the kind of environment where transition is most likely to occur. Now, campus visits, we have lots of people coming to campus, whether or not it's a campus tour, visiting scholars, graduate students who are coming to interview for PhD positions. We're making a strong recommendation that all of these events be canceled or postponed. It feels a little irresponsible at this point in time to be, bringing people in on planes, through airports, and then onto campus unless it's absolutely necessary. And in a similar way, our athletic events will continue, but right now they're going to go crowdless or fanless, in that there won't be fans attending those events. Okay. Sometimes when I look at this slide, I feel like I'm back in kindergarten, but then I realize how many of these activities I don't do on a regular basis, to keep myself healthy and from spreading the flu. So I'm trying really hard to wash my hands for at least 20 minutes and use that hand sanitizer whenever I can. I'm coughing in the elbow of my suit or using a tissue whenever I cough. The hardest thing that I don't even know I'm doing most of the time is scratching my face, nose, or mouth. So I'm really trying to keep my hands off of that. I'm trying to disinfect things that I never disinfected before, and I'm trying to avoid contact with sick people. And if I get sick, I'm going to stay at home, and I hope all of you will do exactly the same thing. Other aspects of social distancing and hygiene that I think are really important to point out is that vulnerable populations, these are particularly people over 60 years of age and with a range of different health conditions, should really limit outings and avoid large gatherings. And for all of us in the UCR family, anybody experiencing, respiratory illness, fever, cough, shortness of breath, or any kind of flu-like symptom, feel free to call. In fact, you should call the hotline at Student Health Services if you're a student, or the UCR Health hotline if you're faculty and staff, 24/7. Somebody will be available to provide you advice on what you should do next if you come down with any of these symptoms. All right. As you're probably aware, you feel like your inbox is being flooded with emails about this, and we're going to keep doing it. Guidance is going to come your way from my office and from the Chancellor's office. At a minimum, there'll be weekly updates, but each of these websites contains a record of information that's going out, as well as a range of information. So EH&S's website has lots of information about coronavirus. We're directing faculty who are trying to think about how to deliver instruction online to go to keepteachingucr.edu, which has a range of resources from how to convert your lecture, to a podcast, to a live performance, like I'm attempting to do right now, to taping and putting video of your lecture up on the web. We're not kind of dictating how any faculty member will make use of alternative instruction. We are just trying to provide supports and flexibility with the goal of having a positive learning experience in the most healthy way possible. The CDC updates almost daily travel notices as things are changing. And the University of California has a website that specifically addresses changes that are being made or recommendations that are made across the whole system. All right. So I think that's a little bit enough about COVID-19, even though I'm sure that questions will be coming at the end. But I didn't want to have a webinar that only talks about the challenges that we're facing right now. I wanted to talk a fair bit of why everybody on campus should be really proud of all the work that we do. You may have seen some of these slides, and I can't tell you that how often that I like to repeat these things, because sometimes I'm not sure that we all believe how good we actually are on this campus. Forbes, US News and World Report, the Times Higher Education, by the way we're moving up in the rankings, it's clear that we're the fastest rising university in America. And it's a thrill this year to be ranked #1 in social mobility by US News and World Report. That means that we take students who come from families in the lowest quintile of the income distribution and push a larger percentage of them into the upper quintiles than any other university in the country. And that's something to be incredibly proud of. And that is due to the hard work that the faculty and staff on this campus do every day through their teaching, mentoring, advising, and overall support for the university. So thank you for that. All right. Other positive things that have been happening over time. Our student enrollment total, both undergraduate and graduate, has increased from a little over 20,000 in 2010 to over 25,000 in 2018, which is about a little less than a 25% increase. This has allowed us to serve more California high school graduates across the state at the time that the legislature and the governor has been not just encouraging, but in some ways demanding that the University of California take more students. And we clearly have responded to that call. During the same time period, we responded to having a real shortage in faculty as we entered 2010. And over an 8-year period, saw a 40% increase in our Senate faculty and including clinical faculty, up to over about 919. We are pretty close to not having any additional office space or lab space for new faculty. But right now, we really responded, to an early need and really boosted those numbers. But the story doesn't end there. Our expenditures from external research, National Science Foundation, NIH, Department of Defense, energy is up 24% since 2012. That's a pretty big jump at a time where these numbers have been going down at other universities across the country. But it translates into the success that our students are having too. It's hard to believe now that that a student entering UCR in 2007, only 41% of that incoming class graduated. And that by the time we got to the entering class of 2014, 62% of that entering cohort had graduated within a 4-year period. Along with this, we've seen narrowing of gaps between low-income students, first-generation students, underrepresented minority students. And it's something that we all can be proud of because it builds off of the commitment and that the faculty and staff have for our students and the work that you do every day to help ensure their success. To give you a little bit of sense of how this compares in the system, I want to take you through a slightly more complicated graph, but I think there's a real payoff here in the story. So on the left-hand side here, we're looking at 4-year graduation rates by what is called the system-wide academic index, which is typically a combination of the entering GPA and SAT scores of entering freshmen. The lowest third of this group, which you might think of as the least prepared entrants, are clustered on the low side of this chart. And the top third, the highest prepared entrants, are clustered on the right. The blue dot is for UCR, and system-wide is the average of the 8 other UC campuses in the system. From this chart, you can see that from the lowest third in preparation to all campuses on the UC, the ones that come to UCR have a 61% 4-year graduation rate, while the UC average for the UC average is 53%. If we move to the students that come in the middle third, the UCR average is a 72% 4-year graduation rate, and the system is just at about the same at 69.6%. And even amongst the most prepared students in the top third, we have essentially the same four-year graduation rate at 81% versus 80.4%. So if you take comparable students across the system, just based on their academic preparation, we meet or exceed the four-year graduation rates when the students are broken out into these tertiles. The biggest thing for UCR, which is what you see on the right-hand side, is that we have the largest number of students in the lowest third of this preparation group in the system at 32,000 or 3,200, excuse me, compared to San Diego and Berkeley that are at about the 400 level. So the successes that we're having with students is with some of the students that come in less prepared, and the work that faculty and staff do on this campus help to ensure their student success. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of the campus for them. Now, I might be accused of hiding things if I didn't talk a little bit about some of our challenges. And I know that a big response from taking additional students, over the last 10 years is that it feels really tight on campus. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget and how we get into the situation that we're in, as well as some of the ways in which we're trying to get out of this. Just a little kind of quick primer on our core revenue and core expenditures. The core part of our budget is the piece that excludes housing and research and focuses on the faculty and staff salaries, the financial aid that we give to students, what it costs to keep the buildings clean and running all the time. You can see in the right-hand pie that our total expenditures were about $575 million last year, with more than 2/3 of that going to salary and benefits, and additional 17% going to financial aid. The pie on the right is the story of the revenue that comes into us. And what's really important to understand is the orange pie is the amount of student tuition and fees from California residents. So half of our core budget comes from tuition. An additional 6% comes from non-resident student supplemental tuition. And then 44% of our budget comes from state allocations that come through UCOP. Over the past 8 years, we've had 7 years with no tuition increases. So what that means is that half of the revenue that we depend on for funding our core expenditures, salary, benefits, financial aid, keeping the lights on, has not increased. So the moderate increases that we've been receiving in state funds hasn't been able to keep up with the increases in expenditures that have primarily been driven by our relatively modest, 3 to 4% increases in staff and faculty salaries. But even a 3 to 4% increase in salaries, when you're only getting a 3% increase from the state, puts you on a trajectory towards budget deficit. And that's the space in which we've been playing, for about the past 7 years, and has really contributed to everybody feeling like we're incredibly under-resourced. By comparison, you see a bar on the right-hand side here for UCR, where the bottom stack on the bar is tuition and fees, which, since that is standard across the system, the bar on the left-hand side, which is the system-wide average, is at about the same space. Then the orange bar is the amount of state support that we get through the UC Office of the President. And you can see that on average, the other campuses get around $1,500 to $3,000 more than we do for state funding. And then we have the non-resident supplemental tuition. We have a little gray bar on the top here, whereas you can see that the system-wide average, which includes, UCLA, Berkeley, San Diego, a much larger share of their revenue comes from non-resident tuition. And so, just the bottom line here is, that while California residents make 82% of the students in the system, they make 96% of the undergraduate students at UCR. And those students are receiving less funding per student from the system. This, again, which I think is a systemic inequality, is something that the chancellor and others in the senior leadership are working really hard to address with the Office of the President. And we see a window to help at least some of the difference in state support across the system. All right. The other pinch point that I know everybody in the room knows and feels is the lack of staff that we have across campus. Estimates have shown that UCR would need to hire 760 more staff to achieve the UC student staff ratio. You see that between 2010 and 2015, staff hiring was either down or pretty flat. There was an 8% increase between 15 and 17, but some of that increase was in really focused areas across campus, particularly in the areas of compliance, our campus council office, and areas that had been really neglected and needed to keep us out of trouble. So even though we're at a level right now of about 3,000 staff, I think everywhere on campus is feeling that pinch. We're hopeful that as our budget situation increases in the next couple of years, that we'll be able to make some serious increases in staff across campus. But even being optimistic about that, if we invested in 30 or 40 new staff hires per year, it's going to take us a long time to fill that 760 staff gap. So we're going to be engaging in an exercise this year to really try to identify, where the biggest pain points are on campus. We're going to be circulating a survey to faculty and staff to give us feedback on those pain points, where they feel that the greatest need for staff is on campus. We're going to be comparing our ratios across categories of staff with the UC and nationwide averages. And we're going to be listening to pitches from unit heads on why they really need to increase our staff. We really know that this is a critical thing to do, and we're thinking really hard about the best way to address it. Okay. I'd say that these are a random sample of pictures from across campus, but these are some of the places that we like to take regents and when the president comes to campus to see that much of our infrastructure hasn't changed since it was built. It doesn't look like there's been major renovations on College Building South since about 1916. Fawcett Laboratory hasn't seen any major improvements. And some of our staff on campus and faculty are out in modular buildings. There's good news and bad news coming on our attempts to work to improve these facilities. And I'll get to that in just a minute. All right. The additional piece of good news that I do have is that we've worked really hard to get additional seats in classrooms that'll come online next fall. Just to give you a sample of this, we converted some computer labs in Sproul and Watkins to classrooms, which gives us a few. The brand new dormitory, Dundee Glasgow, is going to have 4 classrooms in it to give us a total of 150 seats. 2 rooms have been converted in Pentland of 100 each that will produce 200 seats for classes. And we're going to be renting 390 classes in the Unix building at least next year, which is going to help us. This will provide an additional 803 seats. The registrar is telling us with these additional seats online and the likely number of students that we hope to have back on campus in the fall, that this should reduce the need for courses to be taught in the evening or on Saturday, which has been a real concern raised by faculty and students across campus. We also have additional seats coming online in fall of 2021. We're very excited about the Student Success Center, which is currently hidden behind that big blue fence right in front of Hinderrocker Hall. We were excited over here when they began laying the concrete about a week ago. And it's pretty amazing that we'll expect a building to go up and open by fall of 2021. That building will have over 1,100 class seats, ranging from about 65 to 400. And then also in that fall, the first apartment building in the North District is going to open. That'll have about, I believe, an additional 1,400 beds for undergraduate and graduate students. But on the classroom side, it's going to give us about an additional 90 seats. I've spent, a lot of time right now, talking about seats, but that's been a major pain point for scheduling classes and getting the classes that the students need in order to make a strong go at graduating in 4 years. And I'm really proud of what the staff has done, both in the colleges, in the registrar's office, and in other parts on campus to really help us relieve some of that pain point, to where we'll expect as much of as almost a 24% increase in seats over the fall 19 number in fall 2021. All right. I also wanted to give you a little bit more of a construction update. These are some nicer pictures of things on campus than the ones we were seeing before. Every week, we're kind of hoping for the barn to reopen and provide us with one of our favorite places to eat. I think this has been pushed out into April now, but I am still hoping every day. I mentioned that Dundee, Glasgow, if you've been by there, scheduled to open this summer with about 800 beds mainly for freshmen. And that's going to greatly relieve some of the demand for housing among our lower class students. We also have plant growth environmental facility, which should be coming online in September of 2020. It's going to make us one of the few places in the country that have, one of these 2-story greenhouses. It's pretty neat to see it go up on the other side of campus. The Student Success Center, which I mentioned before, is pictured on the left. So that blue fence will not be there forever. The North District development is starting out with an apartment that will have about 1,400 beds, and over about a 5-year period, if those beds fill, this will be kind of a staggered construction project, which should be able to increase the number of beds on campus by about 5,000. We'll also be seeing major parking structure come online in March of 2021. I know that it disadvantages people who were parking in lot 13, but once that parking structure goes in, I think it's going to relieve a lot of parking pressure on that side of campus. Okay. I'm going to skip a few things because I want to maximize the amount of time that we have for discussion. And I want to give you a little bit of a highlight of where we are with strategic planning. Last spring, the Chancellor presented the vision of where do we want UCR to be on our 100th anniversary in 2054. You might say that that seems so far in the future that you can't even imagine it. But the hope is that by looking 34 years into the future, we can really focus on what are our strengths today that we could leverage into being something that we can barely imagine might be on campus now. We've broken into 5 working groups, co-led by faculty and including staff, students, alumni, and members of the community to help craft goals and a vision for an unparalleled student experience, research and scholarly distinction, a thriving campus community, and what kind of contributions to the public good does UCR want to be known for. But we want to put this plan within a package that really acknowledges our sustainability needs, both with regards to infrastructure, operations, and finance. Originally, we had planned for this presentation for me to do a little less talking and be able to have an activity where all of you were able to engage in some of the ideas that are coming out of these working groups and get your feedback on them. Since this is my first cross-campus webinar, I was a little nervous to break into virtual subgroups today and work on that. But we're going to plan that activity for early in April quarter and try to bring as many of you back as well as your colleagues into a Zoom meeting to really provide us feedback on the work that's coming out of each of these groups. Just to give you a sense of the timeline through now, which is winter 2020. It's hard to believe that we're almost finished. committees have been meeting and consulting. Some of you may have participated in some of the forum or focus groups or surveys that the different working groups have been spreading across campus in order to try to maximize community input. In phase 2, which should start this spring, possibly with a little bit of a delay. Each of the committees is going to be working on kind of summarizing, what they've learned and helping us build a framework that can go into the actual drafting of a strategic plan over the summer that will be broadly shared with the campus, including the Academic Senate, the Staff Assembly, and any others that would like to review it and provide feedback, with the goal that by winter quarter of 2021, we'll be in a position to launch our new strategic plan. It's pretty exciting. I think there are a number of ideas that are really bubbling up out of the group. One theme is community engagement, which has come up across multiple working groups, kind of with the idea that UCR wants to become the campus that's known globally for its emphasis on engaging with the community, both in our instruction and in our research. And so what will be coming back to you in April is trying to help us figure out, well, what might that look like? And do you think it's a good idea? Another concept that's bubbling up is the idea that UCR might want to become known as a student-centered research university, and getting a handle on, well, what would that mean for undergraduate students, graduate students, and for faculty, both in their role as teachers, mentors, and researchers. And then just a third one that I'd like to point out is all of the committees recognize the immense asset that we have in the diversity of our students on campus, and the commitment that we have to working towards increased equity and inclusion. A question that's really being batted about is, what would it take to take those assets and really think about how that could positively leverage our research, teaching, and service missions. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is not something that we have separate from all of the core aspects of our mission. And finally, one of the other really exciting ideas that keeps bubbling up is the concept of co-creation of knowledge. Knowledge that's co-created between faculty, students, and the community. And ideas coming out of how this might affect teaching in the university, as well as research and creative activity. Now, I haven't put any of these things in writing because I don't want you to hold me to them. I just wanted to give you a feel for the ideas that are bubbling up. And I also want to direct you to our website, strategicplan.ucr.edu, which has summaries of all of our strategic planning steering group meetings. It has reports that are being put together, as well as more information on who occupies all of these committees. I encourage you to reach out to members of committees to give them your ideas, or send them to us at strategicplan@ucr.edu. We've also just recently completed a progress report on how well we completed the objectives in the UCR 2020 plan. And if you'd be interested in taking a look at that, you can find it at strategicplan.ucr.edu /resources. All right. We've had a forum on research and scholarly distinction that we had about 50 faculty and staff attend on February 27th. And we're going to continue these forms of outreach, even though they might be moving to an online forum rather than an in-person forum. The next one scheduled is for April 1st for unparalleled student experience, and for April 2nd on contributions to the public good. If you hold up your camera, you can scan this QR code and RSVP to the forum on the public good if you already know you want to attend. Now, I've been talking for long enough, and I wanted to leave at least 15 minutes to answer questions. And I see that questions are starting to come in. I have a group of people in the room with me who I might call upon for answers, just like in a game show. And I kind of wish they had fed me answers as they fed me the questions, but that really wouldn't be fair, would it? Okay, so let's see. All right. I'm going to start reading the questions as they came in, and I'm going to try to get through as many of them as possible. So the first one is about COVID-19. If there's a campus closure or a furlough, will staff get paid? There are no plans right now to close the campus. And we currently don't have any plans for any layoffs of faculty. It's hard to predict, what could go on as this virus turns into a pandemic, but I'm hoping that the guidance that'll come out this afternoon from HR will help to give you a sense of how different forms of leave can be used as it's necessary for you to take care of yourself and your family, as well as the processes for people who can work off-site, which would, just like getting the students to go home, getting a certain percentage of the faculty, a certain percentage of the faculty and the staff to work remotely can further reduce the density of people on campus and make it safe for those of us that will be working on campus. Is there a plan for part-time employees? This is one that actually senior leadership is meeting on every day for an hour, where we're trying to come up with what the contingencies would be if certain aspects of the campus either had to close or were not able to be fully staffed. The goal is to have work for everyone, but the specific guidance on that is going to be forthcoming. I'm sorry I don't have any additional information on that. As I said, guidance from HR about staff working remotely will be coming out this afternoon. But this is really going to be decisions made between unit heads and employees on how many people that we'll need to have on campus and which employees can do their work off-site, without any interruption. But as I said before, we are going to try to achieve the goal of reducing the number of staff that may have to come in every day. Some people may be coming in, 3 days a week and working from home 2 days a week. There's no campus-wide plan. This will all be worked out in collaboration with your unit head and human resources. Any updates on early childhood education services? Right now, the Early Childhood Education Center is running. I believe I heard we had to send a child home because they had gotten sick, but we have no known incidences of the coronavirus. And in the short term, we're going to be working on having the early childhood services available, because we know how critical they are to families, but in that environment, practicing the kind of hygiene and social distance which will reduce the likelihood that the children might be infected. This is kind of an odd virus in that children seem to be the least affected by it. In most cases, only having mild symptoms. But what we don't know is how infectious children are when they get the disease. And so we'll be updating information, as we learn, and we try to balance families' needs with the safety of students and their families. Enrollment and faculty growth. Enrollment is rising, faculty is rising. Will there be corresponding growth for staff? As I said during the talk, I think we know that pressure is being felt on all parts of campus, both in the academic units, in the support units across campus. We're going to be working hard to identify where the biggest pain points are and to try to address those each year in which we have the funding to make progress on that. But we know that it's one of the biggest things that we need to spend on as we, just to address the needs that we have on campus now. What, if anything, can we as UCR employers do to help make the case for increased state funding for the UCs in general and more equitable state support for UCR in the system? This is a great question. It never hurts, to send a note to your legislator or senator talking about your support for all of the great things that we do at UCR, but the challenge that we have in funding and the range of needs that we have in those areas. Our local legislators have actually been incredible champions for us, with Senator Richard Roth and Assembly member Jose Medina really pushing for a $25 million increase for our School of Medicine, which would, if awarded in this year's budget, hopefully we'll know by May, but looks really good, would be a permanent $25 million increase in funding for the medical school, which will both allow it to expand and better serve its mission, but take some of the financial challenges from the main campus that are currently used to subsidize some of those of the operations of the School of Medicine. Okay, graduate students. What is the plan for graduate student funding going forward, and for proactively engaging with graduate students so that we avoid future labor conflicts? So the few things that we have done in this area is increased our meetings with the Graduate Student Association leadership, and have begun, hearing from them what the major pain points that graduate students are feeling. Housing is clearly one of them, and we're working hard to increase the number of housing units on campus, but they're being built in a way that our goal is that they'll be below market rates in Riverside by the time that they're constructed, and that we'll be able to keep the increase in those costs at a more sustainable level than the costs of housing in the region right now. We're also working with the other campuses across the system to brainstorm different ways in which we could increase, the size of some of the scholarships that graduate students receive in their first year or throughout the time that they're here. Because we know that kind of current levels of funding are not where we would like them to be. So another thing that we're adding is a staff member liaison in student affairs who will work directly with the grad students on making sure that the programming that we have on campus is not just suitable for undergraduates, but takes graduate student needs into account as well. And as we're trying to address the mental health challenges that all of our students have on campus, related to, anxiety, stress, depression, that we have enough clinicians available. We're continuing to try to hire in that area, and we're already starting to make plans on building a new student health center, which will have kind of separate entrances and connections for graduate and undergraduate students. And I think I have one more question. So if you have one that's burning, you might want to get it in. Oh, here they are. They're coming in now. So will construction projects be closed as a result of recent campus mandates? If so, what will be this mean for the campus and those employees that are reasonable that are responsible for this service on campus? Right now, we have no plans for the construction projects to be slowed or closed. Our leadership is working with the contractors who are doing this to make sure that people who are sick are not coming on campus, and that the workers that are here are practicing safe hygiene practices. But because of the kind of level of density and the fact that so much of the work is outside, I believe that unless conditions get much worse than they are now, that this work will continue. But we're monitoring this every day, and will provide you with updates on that. And then let's see. More COVID-19 questions. I'll see if I can get to one or two of these. Are there any plans to provide guidance for faculty and staff and students who are parents if schools and daycare close? This is an excellent question. This will be provided in the guidance coming out with HR this afternoon, particularly around leave policies. If you're interested in more general information just about kind of the health and the spread of the virus, I would make connections to our EH&S website, and there's plenty more information there. And guidance for staff whose partner family members have traveled and return, should they self-quarantine? Well, if they come back from an area that's been designated by the CDC as level 3, I think they should absolutely go into self-quarantine and minimize their contact with other people. They should be instructed to do that when they come in, but I know that airports can be porous in that way, and it's really everybody's responsibility to take care of themselves, so that they reduce the risk of infecting other people. I would be cautious coming back from level 2 country, which now Japan is one that is categorized that way, and I would monitor every day to see which countries move up into category 2 and 3, and actually which part of places in the United States seem to be having large outbreaks. I wouldn't recommend that anybody go to Seattle anytime soon, and there are challenges across the country. But definitely, if anybody comes in contact with anybody that's identified as having the virus or that you suspect could have, I would recommend self-quarantine. And then, we're trying to work through these issues. We're learning new things every day. The situation is fluid with the virus, and we're going to do our best to let you know what we know and what policies we're implementing on the campus as soon as possible. We recognize that this is incredibly disruptive to everybody's lives, but we are really, prioritizing the safety of our students, staff, and faculty, while doing everything that we can to keep our learning and research missions moving forward. So on a closing note, we had more than 400 attendees today, and we've gotten so many questions that I won't have time to get to them all. But as I noted earlier, we're currently planning an online forum specifically related to strategic planning for early spring quarter. And I hope that you'll all join us then and push both new questions in our direction and actively participate in some of the online activities that we'll plan for you. So thank you, and have a safe and productive afternoon. Goodbye. Sorry, I didn't have any questions. I couldn't just jam it through.
No, it's fine.
It's okay.
Did you hear anything that sounded wrong
Do
to
you
you?
want to stop your video? Stop your video.
I thought I did. How do I do that?
Down the bottom. Looks like constant.